There we go. We're away. So thank you for joining you. This is a new conversation that came out of some people asking me to talk about business models. And so I've reread a lot of the books around the place, and I'm going to take you through some ideas that I've gleaned from them to stimulate today's conversation. And of course, as usual, we'll be looking for, as we go, what's the one action that you will take next. And as you know, throughout the series, we talk about quantum leaps, and often people think that a quantum leap is a big jump, but it's actually, the science teaches that it's actually a very small change. The significance is that it's a jump from here to there. So when we talk about your one action, see it as a quantum leap. It doesn't have to be anything major. The significance is it's a shift from here to there, or a jump from here to there. That's what the science teaches. And taking that approach helps us to get past stress, because I think this is just one of my all-time favourite insights from Eckhart Tolle, who wrote that wonderful book called The Power of Now. He says stress is caused by being here and wanting to be there. And I just think that's so insightful. And so one quantum leap at a time actions reduces stress. And that's what appreciative leaders are expert at. They're experts at taking quantum leaps. They know exactly where they are, they know exactly where they want to be, but then they forget about that and focus on the next quantum leap. Now, traditionally, business models are about how a company creates and captures value, and the value proposition and pricing mechanisms and supply chains are all key ingredients. And a value proposition, of course, is how precisely does it nail the customer's problem. Now, I actually prefer to create and deliver value, and I prefer a value promise rather than a proposition. What do you guys think?
I'm happy to say it's a nicer use of language, Ian. You've captured it beautifully there. A value promise personalises it. Proposition sounds quite too business-like, perhaps. But
and I think, thank you, Jim. And I think proposition also has this thing that we're actually proposing something rather than promising something.
Yeah, it's a commitment.
It's a commitment.
About delivering
value. And I reckon that's far more valuable. When I say I'm going to give you this value, it's a promise, not a proposition.
Mm-hmm.
The two popular books are Business Model Generation from the Focused Strategizer. Alex Osterwalder, who you might have come across, is a popular author. And I actually like Blue Ocean Strategy. I think it's a personal preference. But all of it captures the rationale of how an organisation creates, delivers, and captures value. And as a general rule, this comes from I actually Googled, what's a business model, and I found this from a company called InnoSight, and I think it's a pretty good snapshot of the four components. There's a customer value proposition, as I've said, I'd call it a promise, and then there's key resources, there's key processes, and there's a way of making profit. So it's pretty basic, but today hopefully we'll get a bit underneath that basic model.
So just explain that. Just if I was asking you what is your business model, you would explain the value promise.
Yes.
Discuss a formula for turning it into a profit, and then
yes.
Describe key processes and key resources for delivering on it.
Correct.
Okay.
Which to me just kind of simplifies it all down. But I think what we're going to get into probably takes it a step further than that basic model, and I think there are implications for both entrepreneurs but also intrapreneurs, and I think intrapreneurs are becoming more important in organisations. Donovan, you're one of them. You're a person that behaves like an entrepreneur inside a large organisation,
mm-hmm.
and I think there's many of those. There's a great website and a lot of resources called the League of Entrepreneurs, which I'd recommend you look up. They've got a lot of great resources. But I think the implications from that model are that we need to have a shared view with everyone, that we have a working relationship with, about what our value delivery promise is, particularly for them. And we need to ensure that they've got a working knowledge of what resources and processes we're using to actually deliver on that promise. And having a shared view with everyone on the time and energy and also the monetary cost of delivering on your promises, I think is a large part of it. Darren, who at the moment we unfortunately can't hear, but Darren will tell you we've done a lot of work in his organisation on role clarity. I long ago abandoned job descriptions, and for many, many years now, at least a quarter of a century, I've been helping my clients to get rid of job description and replace them with role clarity statements, where the emphasis is on who does that person's role have a relationship with, and what is the value promise to each of those people. And that is the essence of a role clarity statement. Of course, it's a game changer for most people in organisations, because the traditional job description talks about tasks as a general rule rather than relationships. And so the pivot, if you look at strategizers' work, they say there's 6 situations when it's time to change your business model and your proposition. And I'll give you a link to that article, down the track. And here's the 6, and hopefully you can see them okay on the screen, or they're a bit small.
It's okay.
Read it.
Yep. So the first one is you need to change your business model or your value promise if you're not generating enough traction from the customer you targeted. This is according to Strategizer. Your value proposition doesn't resonate with your customers. Your acquisition and retention strategy doesn't generate the growth you hope for. Customers aren't willing to pay the price. You can't build the product and or your costs are too high, or there's external forces that are threatening your business model. So I thought they were a useful 6 to think about. And I think they have implications internally as well. And what I've tried to capture here is that these, I think, are the 3 lessons. You need to have a shared view with everyone you have a working relationship with on what your value delivery promise to them is. So in your case, Donovan, you've got I think you got 5 direct reports now. Is that right? Or 4 direct reports?
Yeah, 5.
Yeah. So you would need to be clear to those 5 people, what is your value promise, value delivery promise to them, and they would have 1 to you. What's your value delivery promise to your boss and anybody else you have a relationship with? This is internally first, and that is very useful if we've got a crystal clear on a view on what the problem we're helping people to solve or the challenge we're helping people to overcome. And I often, when I undertake mentoring work or do advisory work, I'm always focused in on with the client or the customer, whatever you would call them, as to what problem are we actually solving, or what challenge are we actually overcoming. And I spend a lot of time getting agreement around that before actually doing any work, because the clearer we are about what problem we're helping people to solve or what challenge we're helping them to overcome, the easier it is to find a pathway to overcome it or solve it. And of course, that helps regular, candid and convivial conversation with everyone that you're delivering value to, and that helps to avoid unnecessary difficulty, conflict or disagreement. So I think there's tremendous value, no pun intended, in getting really clear with people on what's our value delivery promise to them and what's theirs to us. What do you think, gentlemen?
Ian, I think this is often key words or sessions used with traditional sales training in terms of getting people prepared to what I call articulate the value and understand there's a problem. there's a question. This statement misses one of the fundamental statements that when you take a sales business development person, which is the question around you understand who has the problem, articulating the problem in their terms, being able to communicate it with them, but you need to actually test to whether anybody actually cares. It's the value of solving that problem for them. So there would traditionally be a fourth statement.
Yeah, I'd go along with it.
Does the stakeholder actually care about the problem enough to have a relationship with you?
I'm sort of, for me, that would be sort of inherent. But
I'm just saying that's in traditional business development training. When you see those lessons, that one would be a fundamental one to be incorporated. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think probably what we're going to dive into as we go here probably reinforces that. Any thoughts, Donovan?
Yeah, I agree. That thing of delivering value and being clear on your roles, I think it comes into that previous slide about promises. So if you agree that this is the value you're going to be delivering, and these are the promises that you commit to, it's all part of, I guess, your profiling work and what you kind of stand for when people work with you. So yeah, I think it's good.
And one way to look at this, the writer of the book, a great book called Essential, and he calls it essential intent. So this helps get people really clear and probably addresses your point, Jim, about does the person who's receiving the value actually care about it? And I just pulled a couple from the book as examples of essential intent, and I included my own down the bottom. What's my intent when I work with people? It's to improve value delivery by employees to each other. That increases value delivery to customers, which means better business results at less personal cost.
Very nicely put.
I found it useful myself to articulate my own intent, and obviously I that Brad Pitt one's a favourite. There was a lot of fuss around Katrina, a lot of messing about. People were dying, people were starving. And he really just nailed it. So this is what we're going to do.
Is that in the book, is it? Brad Pitt, great business commentator of the 21st century.
Yeah, well, it's interesting how, he put his money where his mouth is.
Good on him. Don't we love it when movie stars take on the government? Love it.
Indeed. I found it delightful myself. And, there's a number of models that you can do, and you can look at the various models that I use later on. One of them is the change process model. So an interesting way that I find out what value do people want me to deliver, I will take them through this change process that says, okay, let's really nail down exactly where we are. Then let's nail down exactly where we want to be. Let's create a series of quantum leaps. Let's leap. Let's see that gives us momentum, and we start again. Another way I would go about that is I see my work as a series of events. So there might be, talks. So, for example, I'm doing a 45-minute keynote talk at a big conference here tomorrow, but the actual event itself, according to the research, is only 24% of the effectiveness. What happens before and after the event, according to research out of Columbia University, is actually more important. In fact, the professor who did the research, up to 50% of effectiveness is after an event, and 26% is before the event. So the client tomorrow, I've spent a lot of time speaking with them to work out exactly what is going to be valuable to them when I do the 45-minute speech for them tomorrow. But what happens afterwards, and so we've agreed on a whole series of steps that happens actually after the talk. So the talk is actually the least most important part of the conversation. But that's not how every organisation look at things. And a lot of people send people to a 2-day training course, for example, but there's been no preparation beforehand and nothing happens afterwards. And then they wonder why the 2-day event didn't work.
Mm.
So I find these two useful ways to look at value. You know, the first one is, well, where are people now, where they want to be, how they're going to get there, etc. But just simply looking at a particular stake in the ground event, which might be a day off site doing a strategic thing, which is important to do, but what happens before and afterwards is actually more important in terms of value delivery. And I've got a whole process around that. This is how I do it when I work with organisations. I take people from information to introspection. So, for example, the client that I'm working with tomorrow, I did a lot of work to come up with information, and then I turned that information into insight, things that the company doesn't know about itself. I then turned that into inspiration. Tomorrow we'll talk with the group about ideas from that inspiration, and we'll identify ones that can be worked on, and then we'll zero that down to some innovation, and then after the event we'll work on implementing that, integrating it with what the organisation is already doing that's working well for them, and then at some point in the future we'll do some introspection. Mm-hmm. So that's another way of a whole value delivery process, or if you like, a business model within a model. And platforms and pinpointing are, of course, very important in this equation. And so if you look at those 6 companies on the screen, interestingly, I saw some research by Deloitte recently. Technology companies are now more valuable than financial services companies. That's never happened in history.
Mm.
And what's the key to all of these companies? They've got a technological platform. It's how they operate their business. Now, of course, the appreciative leader community is a platform.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
You just need a zillion followers, Ian, and you're there.
Well, in my view, I'm not interested in a zillion followers. I'm only interested in maybe 150.
Okay.
A different model. So, Uber, Airbnb, Instagram, Facebook, Amazon, Google, they're after the masses, whereas I'm not. I'm only after a very, very, very small number of people. And it would depend on your business model. How many customers do you actually need to generate the income that you need? For some organisations, that's thousands of people, but for someone like me, it's a very small number of people. For someone like Darren, who's in the rent-a-car business, he's got a different number. It's certainly not thousands, but it's more than my 150. In your case, with a government agency, you've got probably several hundred customers, I would imagine, Donovan, but not thousands.
Well, there is a commercial services section, and I think they've got thousands of customers in that space.
Okay, so it would depend on the division and it would depend on what problem they're solving and who for.
Yeah, so there's like a number of sections within that umbrella, I guess.
Yeah, and as you say, Jim, who cares?
Well, that's about a business development person articulating a value promise, being able to turn it into money for an organisation. So
yes.
That's where that model comes from in Business Development Training 101.
Yes. So another way to look at this, and this is probably why I like the Blue Ocean Strategy book, do you have an existing product that's in an existing market, or do you have an existing product that you want to put into a new market, or is it a new product that's servicing an existing market, or is it a new product in a new market, which is what's the blue ocean? A lot of businesses have not thought about this. Most businesses are fighting in the red ocean, which is they've got an existing product in an existing market. And one of the reasons why Darren, who's online, unfortunately we can't hear him, but Darren he's an Avis franchisee. Okay. Darren's business model is he doesn't lease the cars, he actually buys the cars, rents them, and then sells them. And that's a brilliant business model, because that's not what most people in the rental car business are doing. They're usually renting the cars, but they're not buying and selling them. So Darren's model is far more powerful and far more successful. And here's an example of insight that comes straight out of the book, because what they talk about is we need to eliminate something, raise something, or reduce something and create something. And that's the example of Cirque du Soleil is the famous one from the Blue Ocean book.
Mm.
And I found it to be a very useful exercise myself for my own business, but also with my clients, to help them to see what could they reduce in their industry, what could they eliminate in the industry, how could they raise the bar, and what could they create that doesn't currently happen in their industry. So another useful way of looking at a business model. And so often just starting with that blank canvas and just looking at that in your business, taking your industry, what could you reduce, what could you eliminate, what could you raise, what could you create, is a useful exercise. But it's also a useful exercise for internal customers as well. You can do that with your staff, Donovan. You know, you could talk about the value you're delivering to them or the value they're delivering to you, and you could have a conversation around what could we eliminate, reduce, raise, and create that would end up with something that's more valuable to people. Any comments, Jim?
I've done a Blue Ocean strategy exercise a few times. Usually the challenge the companies I've worked with have faced have primarily been in understanding what to eliminate. You know, sort of understanding what is the value of each element of your current business model in terms of how it's valued by your target customer base.
Yeah.
I mean, Soleil is a really good way of understanding it, in the sense that they changed the whole concept of what a circus was.
Correct.
And turned it into an artistic event by deciding that having, in effect, things like animals wasn't valued highly enough.
No, and that's of course why they eliminated animal shows.
That's right.
They also eliminated star performers.
Yep.
Yep.
So, you know, if you're taking that to for example, a car rental business, you know, trying to think what you would eliminate would be a much more challenging notion, I would have thought.
Yes, it is. One of the things that Darren's eliminated is you know, how the cars are transported from one place to another. So that he's got very good at shifting vehicles around, which saves on petrol and, you know, other things. But yes, you got to get much more sophisticated in most businesses and probably the circus. But it was genius, though, wasn't it, from the Cirque du Soleil people?
Yeah, but you know, normally in a services business, you've added your services over the years because customers have told you they value them. You're competing to try and create a non-compete market when you're in a service business. In my mind, pretty tough gig, because the core of your business is the service. And you feel generally that you can't give a reduced level of any of the services that you currently offer. So I just found it very challenging.
And that, of course, that's really where the experience economy was, you know, born out of.
Sure. That's in terms of, you mean valuing the experience over and above valuing what I call the going in and doing business for a product or service.
Yes, but also the customer experience, if that's improved in the customer's eyes, then there's a perception of greater value delivery.
Well, that would be an interesting model for a car rental or a government, or for a government service. Treating it as a performance that was charged for would fundamentally be a different business model.
Well, it is, and in fact, Darren is actually doing that. When you rent a car from him, you get an experience that you don't get typically.
Good, that's pretty good.
And that's how he differentiates himself.
Okay.
You know, when you buy a car from Darren, you get a better experience than you do from buying from the car yard down the road.
That might be just simply because he does it so much better.
Well,
That's distinct from a completely different model of business.
well, I think
I'm still going to contact him because I want to rent a car.
okay.
But I want the experience. Whereas Cirque du Soleil is not getting the same audience as the people who went to circuses. They're getting a much more audience.
But if you look at the experience in general, I mean, really differentiation essentially is you if it was complete differentiation, you would be doing your people would be doing what your competitors' people aren't doing.
Yeah, that's totally different.
That's very hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do something better, differently, or more uniquely. There's also greater value in that.
That's true, but that's not a blue ocean approach.
No, I agree.
That's just winning in the red ocean.
It just goes to show that there are a number of ways that you can do it. You can either completely go out and try this blue ocean approach, which is very hard to do, or you can focus on just being better, different, or more unique than the next person.
Fair enough.
Is much easier to do.
That's very true.
And there's also, if you look at the business model canvas that comes from the strategizer folk, and here's how I took their analysis and looked at my own business. So who are the key partners? What are the key activities? What's my promise? What are my customer relationships? What are my customer segments? I've changed this model a little bit. I put people in there I separated people and resources. In the actual strategizer model, they count people as resources, which I think is ridiculous and an insult to people. So I've separated and put people and resources as two different things. And then what channels are you delivering your products and services in? What are the different revenue streams and what's the cost structure?
Yep.
I think it's a very useful way for any business or any team to look at itself. What do you think, Jim? Have you had to use this one?
I think business canvas model is now one of the key common tool language items used by most of the key people working in the field of strategy today. You can't, if you go to the, Michael Porter's group, the Monitor group in Australia, their starting point is a business canvas and painting it for each and every business client. So for me, it's fundamental strategy language.
Yeah.
Anyone in business that thinks they're going to develop a strategy should be able to identify their own business canvas like this. And it's really well done, Ian. I think you've done a good job. I don't know that I agree with the notion that it's an insult to people to think of them as a resource for delivering value, but that's fine. You've just split it out.
No, I think this whole idea...
That's a core document today, and almost all the businesses that are in my groups, we would all look at that as a key starting point in describing our business.
Yeah, good. And Donovan, for you, it's a good way to look internally as well. As I say, I've changed the proposition. I've changed the word proposition to promise, and I've separated people from resources. Other than that, it's the standard model.
If that helps people better define their business canvas for a strategy session where external perspectives are brought to make people think outside the square, that's excellent.
I mean, in the so-called meaningful economy, dominated by people 36 years of age and under, they don't want to be referred to as assets, capital, or resources.
Fair enough.
And so...
We all need to feel valued.
That's exactly right. And they're almost 50% of the workforce. So, I have abandoned the use of human resources, assets, or capital from my language. I don't use it at all.
That's fair enough. And I don't think it's just millennials. I think all of us want to feel valued.
Indeed, which is why it's a part of my key process, of course. People feeling valued, living values, delivering value.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a blank one there for you to if you haven't done, Jim, obviously you're a guru on this process, but
Not a guru, but someone who uses it as part of strategy and capturing the starting point for a strategy process.
yes, I'm about to, with one of my groups, I'm about to take them. So I've done bits and pieces of this, but I'm about to take them through this as an exercise. Individually, I've done it with a number of people over the years. I do say though that I agree with this.
All models are wrong, but some are useful. Well, it depends if you're saying that all models are intrinsically wrong because they can't be 100% right. That's a fair enough statement.
Yeah, I also found it a bit humorous, but because we often get, particularly us mentors and consultants, we get attached to our own models. So I sort of keep this statement handy so I don't get too attached.
Fair enough. Good. Who's George Box?
He was a famous mathematician, apparently. So I sort of took all of that sort of thinking and those couple of examples to use to do a review of your team or your business. And then I started thinking about, well, when do you actually quit? Because you can pivot, which I found Blue Ocean Strategy Exercise or the business model canvas exercise are a good way to tell you whether you need to pivot or persevere. But what if you need to quit? And so I come up with a couple. I think Seth Godin's rule of 10 is a good one. He says if you can't find 10 people who absolutely love what you've got, then you better go and start again.
Yeah.
Well, 10 out of 150 is a lot harder than 10 out of a zillion.
True, but if you can't get the 10, you can't get the 150, or you can't get the 10, you can't get the 1,000, or whatever your number is. I think there's a wonderful article by Kevin Kelly, the ex-Wired guy, about 1,000 true fans, he calls it. If you Google it, you'll find it if you're not familiar with his work. But everyone's got a number. It's a matter of knowing what it is. And then of course the lean guy, Eric Rees, his minimal viable product is a good concept. And I think just simply when you want to change, I made a change in my business where I don't travel as much, and having flown from Melbourne to Newcastle today and then wandered around the Hunter Valley trying to find where I'm at, I'm started to think it's pretty good idea that I don't do it as much as I used to. Even though it's enjoyable to come to nice places and meet new people, there's a price you pay, to get there.
Yeah.
And equally, when your passion dies, or you've decided you don't want to do it anymore, or if somebody in your business made you a grandfather offer.
Sorry, what's a grandfather offer?
That comes from the movie The Godfather.
Which means?
You were made an offer you couldn't refuse.
Oh, right. I'm about to become a grandfather, and that's going to might get me to quit, Ian.
I probably should call it the Godfather offer rather than the grandfather offer, but
fair enough.
Fair enough. So, just as a way of looking at this, in your are you leading or are you following? Are you waiting for others to fail? Are you wishing you were someone else? Are you inspiring those that are sitting on the fence? I love the particular photograph that I discovered somewhere where one bird's decided to take off and the rest are having a look. And the key to business models or anything, or the key to knowing when to pivot or just keep going or actually quit, is obviously surrounded in a lot of these things. So we kind of explored a bit today. What can you take away from it? What's your quantum leap going to be? Anything come to mind? Bit different to our usual chat, but I thought we'd have a look at something different.
Yeah, I think I like that one in with the 4 quadrants where it was the circular to say the circus example where what they were going to raise, what they were
Yeah,
going to
so
lower.
that's that eliminate. I'll just flick back there. So that's that one.
Yeah, I like this one. I think I might apply this to some of the things at work.
So slide 21 when I put the pack up, in a day or so.
Okay, cool.
Donovan, I suggest you read the book. It's a very easy to read book. You should have a read of the book.
Okay, all right, I will.
Yeah, it is. It is a great book.
Just so you'll get more value out of trying to do that exercise.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I agree, Jim. So, Jim, what about you?
I'm going to actually try your version of the business canvas. Absolutely. I like that. And as I said, I think it's an important tool for people to, because it actually helps get everyone in your organization to understand your value promise.
That's this one.
So I think I will definitely try that out with, I guess, the businesses that I work with, to actually just expand it a little bit like you've done and see what different insights that delivers.
Yes, and even the conversation around, I found it useful, the conversation around proposition and promise. Just have a conversation around that is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly with entrepreneurs or people inside of the business. When I've helped people to do role clarity, the discussion around what value are you delivering to the people you have relationships with, that in itself is a very useful conversation.
Oh, you would do this canvas not just at the business level, but down at the individual level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, particularly around. It's like, for example, I had an accountant once who used to give his people wonderful reports. At least I thought they were wonderful until I talked to the people who were getting them, and they thought they were terrible. And so
he had a value promise, but the value wasn't valued, but the value wasn't valued.
No, and so we had a conversation with the team and said, well, and as we got into the conversation, we discovered that the information and the insights were valued, really valued.
Oh, okay.
But it was the way that they were presented was what they didn't like. And it took too much time for them to, find the gold. So just simply by creating some visuals, it became a game changer for the guy who was delivering the value and the people that were receiving it. So, yeah, I've always found it a very useful. I remember I read many, many years ago, and it stayed with me, the great Japanese industrialist Karu Izukawa, if I pronounce that correctly. But he said, the customer is whoever gets your work next. And the moment I read that, I just, it stayed with me. It was probably 30 years ago I read that, and it stayed with me ever since. And so, I've sat in on and led and facilitated many, many conversations with people about who do you have a relationship with and what are you delivering to those people, and have you sat down with them and agree with them that what you're giving them is precisely what they want in the way that they want it.
Actually, Ian, I can almost not just imagine, I can visualize you doing that extremely well, with everyone around you and talking about the value they deliver to one another, and you playing what I call the Socrates role of challenging them with very well-timed questions.
Well, that's very nice of you to say that, but yeah, that's often how it works. But people never fail to leave such a conversation with an insight into either how they're giving someone something. They're actually giving them good stuff, but not in the way that people actually want it. And that's a common example. And the other one is that they're slightly off, that they've just presumed, often for years, that people were happy with what they were getting, and the people on the other end, of course, didn't want to rock the boat, so they didn't say anything. And the end result was, nothing valuable was actually being delivered.
Mm-hmm. Good.
And when you get into it, of course, it's a game changer. All right. So, anything else, gentlemen, before we sign off? I think I might have had a couple other things. This is a useful way of looking at it.
Stay, stop, or savvy up.
Which comes from Dr. Jason Fox, who you may have come across, who's a brilliant young guy out there. He wrote a wonderful book called The Game Changer, and then his recent book was called The Quest. Very, very insightful stuff.
Ian, you will forever be our source of the latest readings on everything to do with leadership and inspiration.
Well, thank you for saying so. That's part of my aim, to be that resource. I just got a text from Darren to say that he very much enjoyed it, but he's had to go. So I'm just going to stop the recording just so that.
Okay, and I'm